gather on the occasion of propositions number 2, Assemblism. It's a second iteration in the series that we call Propositions for Non-Fascist Living, and the second propositions gathering we convened together with Jonas Stahl and his studio as part of our collaboration on the artistico-political campaign New Union that Studio Jonas Stahl, in collaboration with Bach, convened throughout the year 2017. It is also the second gathering in this building where we moved only some 2 months ago. And we learn the building as we go, and it's extraordinarily exciting. It's changing all the time. For those of you who know the building or who were here with us for the propositions number 1 will hopefully appreciate enormous progress, enormous change in the building. We're moving towards quite an exciting site for the contemporary, I believe. For those of you who are here for the first time, I will understand if you see this as a kind of untidy building site, because that's what it is. But I'd like to think about the building as a building that we are assembling, that is being assembled as much as it assembles us for this very gathering. Now, I must admit that I find tremendous, but then tremendous joy in living and working in this kind of impromptu, very makeshift environment. And trust me, every 10 minutes or every half an hour when I come down from the office for coffee downstairs, it's different and it's quite fascinating. And we just chose to embrace this impromptu, temporary, makeshift state, this conceptual makeshiftness, if you will, as something that we consider necessary for sort of work, sort of institutional practice that we at Bach aspire to. Specifically the theoretically informed and politically driven practice of an institutional practice of an art institution that wants to create conditions for coming together of artists, thinkers, and the precarious class, if you will, coming together around the urgencies of the contemporary, which themselves are in continuous flux, always makeshift, and in need of make-do approach. With such an embrace of the impromptu, we want to institute otherwise. And clearly the life of an art institution changes rather significantly as, let's say, the long-term exhibition planning, in fact, makes way for significant reshuffle of resources of knowledge, relation, time, space, etc., to rather seek forms and accommodate a practice of continuous thinking and imagining, which is in flux with the happening in the world, which gets intermittently interrupted by action, if you will, of negotiating the urgencies in and with the public. Now, in a framework so outlined, I believe that the space of art can become a shared place for making visible the evidence that others are struggling with the same questions. And it is around these questions, around these matters of urgencies that one assembles in makeshift constellations of artworks, lectures, reading, discussion, screening ideas, rehearsals, performances, you name it, and bodies of people in explorations of being together, of human and non-human agents, if you will, both in life and as an art form. I wonder whether one could then understand the role of the artist as that of a convener, the one who calls for, who convenes the gathering on the basis of the common questions and urgencies. For she, the artist, is neither a protest artist, as we know, a protest artist producing protest ephemera, nor the avant-garde, who, and I'm borrowing from a colleague and thinker Ellen Feis, might on one hand reflect the values of the protest, of social movements, etc., or even provide or attempt at providing political horizons. But those productions are not part of the daily protest machinery, but are instead operating within the language of the artistic canon. And I think the situation changes if we think of the artist as a convener. Because this binary between art or art space and the political, to simplify a little bit, or between the space of art and the space of popular assembly, that's the space within which I think we work together with Jonas over the course of last year, but actually over the course of a couple of years, in fact. So this boundary is then renegotiated, it's rethought, it's thought through differently. And thus not by dislocation of the artist into the political movement, neither by the reverse move of trying to so-called include other communities in what we conventionally think of as the art world or the space of art. But through a strategic kind of tactical repositioning of the artist, of being with both the protest movement and with art at the same time, being with, being alongside. And I think this position to be a sort of a tactical manywhere. It's not one or the other, it's rethinking the position of the artist, this tactical manywhere zigzagging transversely and productively among the often makeshift, smaller scale economies of the political assembly, political protest, political movement, and at the same time, global circuits of culture production. This kind of positioning, and I'm aware that I'm bringing a couple of kind of offhand remarks to the table for the conversation throughout the day. But this kind of positioning also moves us away from an edifice of critique. That's how we normally see the relationship between art and politics, in a way. So it moves us away from art as a critical cartography of the conditions of the world, and toward articulating how things could be otherwise, toward articulating propositions, in other words. And I like to think about critique as proposition, which just does not mean just being against. It is not about rehearsing opposition and dichotomies and binaries, but rather it materializes itself in spite of, not against, in spite of conditions of the present, as the art, if you wish, of or in the otherwise. That's how we think through these issues here at BAC. This brings me finally to the large conceptual framework for this gathering, which is the series of propositions for non-fascist living. We at BAC outlined this framework for ourselves, and in the realm of micropolitical and artistic experimentation, for our search of how one, under the conditions of the present, under the contemporary condition, how one can live in a non-fascist way. This means, I think, to rebel against violence towards life, all sorts of life, human, inhuman, organic, non-organic. It is a struggle that does not concern just those who occupy subordinate positions in the power relations that predominate in all fields of social life, but it traverses the whole of society, as well as the whole of biosphere and the planet. And this is quite important if we want to talk about a larger constellation, a larger assembly of how we are being together in the world, whether it comes to human, non-human, organic, non-organic agents. And I'm stressing this with reference to philosopher Sueli Rolnik, with whom just this week we happened to have an intensive workshop together with the BAC fellows who joined us for this week leading to this assembly. And Sueli herself always stresses that this practice, this rebellion against violence towards all forms of lives, is actually the matter of, and I quote, affirming life in its germinative essence, and thus of abandoning power relations as we know them, resisting abuse as the condition for dismantling the power of the colonial capitalist unconscious. Now I'm aware the term non-fascist living is complex and uneasy, and in itself untidy and very difficult to grasp. And we're taking time here at BAC for it to unfold over the course of this long-term discursive and research series and in our thinking, and in our imagining, and in our practice. It's really important that we do not talk about non-fascist living, but that we live non-fascist life. Now, in line with philosopher Michel Foucault, the non-fascist life is, and I quote, art of living counter to all forms of fascism. Not only historical fascisms, that's how we think fascisms very often, not only historical fascisms, the fascism of Hitler and Mussolini, and but also the forms of contemporary fascisms, clearly, something that has been the undercurrent of a politics of hate emerging within the contemporary condition. But actually any forms of fascism, and following Foucault, that would mean everything that causes us to love power, to desire the very thing that dominates and exploits us. Now, decidedly, and I would like to stress it, the quest for non-fascist living is not about fascism. It's not to provide discourse for fascist ideologies. You could neither reduce it just to mere anti-fascist stance. Of course, it's part of it. But there's more to it, and very much in line with critique as proposition. I think it's about imagining and embodying a new script of social, ecological, and technological relatedness, as it were, instituting thus a model of the world otherwise, of living or being together otherwise. This is always necessarily a collective effort. And I'm grateful that today we can be unfolding this conversation together with you. But I'm excited that we at BAC can engage in this trajectory, not only with extraordinary team, and there are no words for thanking my colleagues. It's been extraordinarily exciting always to work within the BAC constellation, but also the fellows BAC research fellows who join us to research variety of propositions for non-fascist living. I have also been privileged to work with Jonas Stahl for a period of quite some years, and it's been always really exciting opportunity to trying to develop another sort of artistic and institutional practice in parallel. And I think I personally and we at BAC have learned a lot how to do things otherwise through this collaboration. And I'm really grateful, Jonas, thank you, as much as the team of remarkable, extraordinary people who surround you and whom you regularly bring into the dialogue and collaboration with us. Of course, I would like to thank, now that I'm at it, all the contributors who will be joining us for this conversation today. And I would like to encourage us to seek wherever possible space to engage in a conversation. Conferences and performative conferences included are always a kind of competition with time. There's always too little time and too much to say and too much to resolve. But let's try to create as much as space for indeed being together otherwise, and I look greatly forward to this. Before I offer the floor to Jonas, who will talk about his conception and practice of assemblism, I have a couple of practical remarks, very quickly. As you see, the building is in the stage of renovation or repurposing, if you will. You're very welcome to roam around and discover whatever its corners there are. I just want to stress that there's one place I don't want you to go to, and that's in respect for our neighbors on Pauwstraat, and that's please don't gather in front of the building, and specifically for the smokers, we built specifically an area for you on the other side of the building. So please go that way, and whenever any of my colleagues run after you to, what's the word, to discipline you, Please know that it's out of the respect for the neighborhood in which we live. We have remarkable people who assembled in our kitchen with extraordinary food, extremely good drinks. And I just would want to encourage you, stay with us for lunch and dinner. It's koffie Leute and ramenas. You're allowed to bring food everywhere you wish, as reconstruction sites are meant to be. And please know that the whole event is filmed and actually streamed live. And that's about it. With which I offer the floor to you, Jonas. Thank you very much for being here again.